Raon Zeegart, often viewed as an outsider within the Zeegart family, is training alone when Runan Sleon quietly approaches him. She steps up beside him and begins observing him intently, her gaze calm and unwavering. Raon, curious yet puzzled by her silent presence, wonders why she's there. After a brief silence, Runan decides to sit down and begins her own training routine alongside him, mirroring his focused energy. After some time, she realizes it wasn't her imagination. Being near Raon, with his cool and calming scent, makes her feel lighter and able to lift more than usual. After a while, Raon's curiosity gets the better of him, and he glances over, asking if she has something she wants to say. Runan simply says no, while reasoning that she should stay around him a little longer. Meanwhile, a group of other students, including Buren Zeegart, a direct member of the Zeegart family, notice the unlikely duo training together. The sight of Runan, who rarely interacts with others, calmly working out beside Raon surprises them. They mutter among themselves, questioning what good could possibly come from associating with someone like Raon. Buren, particularly annoyed by the sight, dismisses Raon's rigorous training as pointless, calling it repetitive and a waste of time. Buren tells the others that Raon is so weak he has to rely on basic exercises just to keep up. Even with all that effort, Buren says, Raon is still nowhere near their level. He then advises his friends to concentrate on improving their swordsmanship, especially since they don't know what the next test will involve. Building strength through real skills, he says, will be more useful than Raon's repetitive training. After Buren and the others leave, a student named Dorian, who isn't part of the Zeegart family, walks over to Raon. Introducing himself, Dorian politely asks if he can train nearby, explaining he's trying to learn the right posture. Raon nods, saying he doesn't mind. Grateful, Dorian hands Raon a cookie as a small thank you. Raon is about to decline the cookie when he notices Runan eyeing it with interest. Without a second thought, he hands it to her instead. Runan accepts it without hesitation and quietly munches on the treat. With that, the three of them settle into training, their silent companionship growing as they continue their exercises together. Day by day, Raon, Runan, and Dorian stick to their basic routines, while Buren and his friends focus on refining their swordsmanship. This simple routine carries on for 6 months. One day, during a morning run, Raon reflects on how hard he's pushed himself, giving everything he has in each session. As he glances around, he realizes that the trainees who used to outrun him are no longer in sight. Now, only 2 people remain ahead of him, Buren and Runan. The day of the test finally arrives, and the training grounds buzz with anticipation as all the guardians, including Raon's mother, Sylvia, gather to watch. Among them stands Wrath, the ghostly beast bound to Raon, who appears with a sly grin, reminding Raon of their bet. If Raon emerges as the top trainee after this test, Wrath will grant him a skill, but if he doesn't, Wrath will gain control over Raon's body. Raon shrugs, unbothered, and tells Wrath that the outcome is still uncertain, brushing off his taunts. While mentally preparing himself, Raon notices Dorian sitting on the ground, visibly shaking. Concerned, he asks what's wrong. Dorian admits that his nerves got the better of him, and he couldn't get a wink of sleep the night before. Raon stares at him, bewildered by his friend's anxiousness, when Runan steps forward and wordlessly offers Raon a cookie. He declines it, thinking for a moment about how he always seems to end up with such odd friends. Sylvia, Raon's mother, glows with pride as she looks over to Helen, their loyal maid, and eagerly remarks on how Raon now stands tall and self-assured. Her eyes sparkle as she speaks, clearly impressed by her son's transformation. Helen, who has watched Raon grow over the years, nods in agreement, adding with a warm smile that Raon has come a long way. She reminds Sylvia that he has spent the last 6 months in relentless training, pushing himself to his limits and, along the way, even managed to form close friendships. Helen isn't surprised by this, explaining that Raon has always had a warm and kind nature. Ever since he was a young child, he's shown thoughtfulness and a natural ability to connect with others. Not long after, an unexpected stir runs through the crowd gathered for the test. People whisper and exchange curious glances as the Zeegart family's patriarch, Glenn Zeegart himself, makes a rare appearance to observe the event. His arrival is a shock to everyone present, as he has never attended this particular event before. Limer, the head instructor of the training hall, asks Glenn what brought him here today, intrigued to know what could have piqued the interest of the revered patriarch. Glenn responds with a calm and steady tone, remarking that this event will greatly influence the future of their family, so he finds it odd that his presence would be considered unusual. Limer smiles, assuring Glenn that he didn't mean it that way. Turning his attention to the assembled crowd, Limer then raises his voice, saying since the patriarch is there is no time to waste, so they will proceed with the test immediately, and he tells them that he will soon explain the details of the challenge they are about to face. In a sudden display of his intense power, Limer releases a powerful aura, creating a heavy, overwhelming pressure that sweeps across the area. The sheer force of it causes the students to feel a deep sense of fear, some even struggling to stay on their feet as the atmosphere grows heavier. As the students brace themselves, Limer announces that the test will be straightforward. They simply need to endure his oppressive aura and make it to the other side of the training field. This, he declares, is the trial he has prepared for them, a test of their resilience and determination. Limer explains to the students that aura is a fundamental aspect of a martial artist, and the test will measure their true value as martial artists. One of the guardians questions this choice of test, pointing out that the children have only recently begun to learn about aura. Other guardians agree, saying that some of the students haven't even started aura training yet, making this test seem unfair. Limer sighs and clarifies that what they are facing is more than just a display of aura. A true aura burst is a reflection of the strength of one's soul, a depth that a martial artist builds over time. This burst isn't dependent solely on visible aura, but serves as undeniable proof of someone's growth as a martial artist. It's a level of essence that can surface even in those who haven't yet fully awakened their aura abilities. Despite Limer's explanation, many of the guardians remain unconvinced, finding his words hard to understand. At this point, Glenn Sieghart speaks up, supporting Limer's perspective. He states that Limer isn't wrong, even if some students haven't formally learned to control their aura. Every person possesses their own unique aura burst, which is shaped by the life they've lived. He adds that the intensity of training and personal experiences can lead even someone with a modest aura to produce a powerful aura burst. Limer grins and says that since no one has any objections, the test will begin. He then calls Raon to step forward. As she approaches, Limer explains that the level of aura burst he will use is one she should be able to withstand if she has truly given her best in training. The objective is simple. She must push through his aura and touch him to pass. With a sudden surge, Limer releases his powerful aura burst, and Raon shivers under its intensity. He warns her that using aura to defend herself will lead to an automatic failure. Instead, she must rely on the mental strength she has built through her training. Raon clenches her teeth, focusing, and steadily moves forward, step by step. Despite the intense pressure, she pushes through and finally reaches Limer, lightly touching his arm. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, she drops to her knees. Limer, however, praises her efforts, acknowledging the hard work she has clearly put into her training, and encourages her to keep it up. Next, Limer calls out Dorian's name, surprising the young boy, who hesitantly asks how the order is being decided. Limer simply replies that he chooses as he pleases. Nervous, Dorian steps forward, reminding Limer that he's known for being weak-willed. But Limer firmly tells him that if he can't handle this, he'll fail. As Limer's aura surrounds Dorian, Raon observes closely and notices that Limer has adjusted the intensity of his aura burst to suit each student's unique level and progress. Raon realizes that Limer has been carefully watching and evaluating each child's growth all along. Though overwhelmed at first, Dorian finally manages to press on and reach out, touching Limer's leg. Limer congratulates him, noting that while Dorian has the skills, he lacks confidence. He encourages him to have more faith in himself and his abilities. The test continues smoothly until it's Buren's turn. As he steps forward, Limer releases his aura, and Buren immediately feels its intense pressure. Shielding his face, he wonders if this is what the others endured. realizing it feels far different than just watching from the sidelines. Overwhelmed, Buren collapses to the ground, unable to move his feet. Limer addresses him directly, saying that Buren's talent is extraordinary and few can match it. However, Limer criticizes Buren for wasting time by letting others follow him around instead of focusing on his own growth. Limer questions Buren's decision to focus solely on swordsmanship, pointing out that without a clear sense of purpose, this training is meaningless. He explains that Buren should have prioritized building his mentality and physical strength instead of just practicing sword techniques. As Buren struggles to rise, Limer scolds him for relying on aura each time he feels stuck, warning that if he uses it now, he'll automatically fail the test. Feeling the weight of Limer's words, Buren recalls the harsh memory of his father's cold gaze on the day he disowned his brother. The thought of facing that same rejection fuels him. He realizes that if he fails, he too might be abandoned. This determination gives him the strength to press on, and he finally manages to touch Limer, passing the test. Limer acknowledges his effort but reminds him that he's still only 12 and should focus on training the fundamentals rather than pretending to be an adult. Finally, it's Raon's turn. As he steps forward, Limer tells him to be prepared since he's the last student to be tested. Raon nods confidently, and Limer unleashes a massive aura burst that even startles Sylvia and surprises Glenn. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Raon remains calm and asks if this is truly his test. Limer, smiling, replies that Raon's potential far exceeds that of Buren or Ronan, and he encourages Raon to endure the aura burst and show his true strength. Raon steps forward, reflecting that true strength lies within the soul, not just in physical form. He acknowledges that within him exists not only the essence of Raon Zeekhart, but also the skills and resilience of Raon the Assassin. Drawing on this dual identity, he is able to move steadily through Limer's intense aura, surprising Limer, who marvels at how Raon can endure it so effortlessly. The Guardians watching from the sidelines are equally stunned, exchanging astonished glances as Raon finally reaches Limer. Calmly, he touches Limer and asks if the test is complete. The other students are equally stunned, staring at Raon in disbelief. They wonder how someone who was once a frail, sickly child and hasn't even started formal aura training could accomplish such a feat. Even Limer, astonished, asks Raon what he truly is. Raon simply responds that he's the same Raon Limer has been observing for the past 6 months. Limer, still processing what he just witnessed, admits that he unleashed an aura burst far beyond Raon's level, intending to play a harmless prank, assuming Raon wouldn't be able to withstand it. He never imagined Raon would actually make it through. Raon remains silent, meeting Limer's gaze with a calm expression. Limer then addresses everyone, announcing that the test is officially over and it's time to reveal the top trainee. The students and guardians watch with bated breath, eagerly waiting for the result. With a grin, Limer proclaims that the top trainee of the 5th training hall is Raon Zeekhart. Sylvia and Helen, Raon's mother and maid, can hardly contain their joy, overjoyed that Raon has achieved this honor. Meanwhile, the other guardians exchange uneasy glances, uncertain how to respond, having all witnessed Raon's incredible feat of breaking through Limer's aura burst. Buren then shouts loudly that he doesn't accept Raon being chosen as the top trainee, declaring that it's unfair. Limer, curious, asks him what he means by this. Buren responds by saying that Raon has lower stamina, strength, and intelligence than he does, so he can't accept that someone like Raon could become the top trainee. Buren goes on to say he's certain Raon must have used some sort of trick to pass the test. A few of the guardians nod in agreement with Buren, questioning how Raon was even able to walk through the aura, especially while under the effects of the bitter cold curse. Some of them even suggest it might be a setup, hinting that Limer could be in on it. Facing Raon directly, Buren declares that as martial artists of the Zeekhart family, they should select the top trainee through a proper duel, rather than relying on the test results. Limer, with a smile, remarks that Buren must really want the top trainee title. He then turns to Glenn and asks for his opinion on how they should proceed. Glenn, noticing the crowd's dissatisfaction, looks at Raon and asks if he's willing to have a duel with Buren, given that it seems many people are unhappy with the current outcome. To everyone's surprise, Raon calmly declines. He explains that the test is over and the results are final, so he sees no reason to fight in a duel without a reward involved. He then turns to Buren and points out that Buren is always talking about honor and family lineage, but he doesn't expect him to be in such complete denial over the test's outcome. Glenn listens and then makes a decision, proposing that they settle the matter with a duel for the top trainee position, with a bronze plaque as the prize. This catches Raon's attention since the bronze, silver, and gold plaques are given to those who achieve notable accomplishments, with rewards that vary depending on the plaque's material. Knowing that Glenn, the patriarch, would be awarding the plaque, Raon feels confident that he could earn some valuable rewards. Now interested, he agrees to duel Buren, feeling motivated by the possibility of receiving a bronze plaque from Glenn himself. Glenn announces that they should start the duel, explaining the rules. It will be a single round, and they're not allowed to use weapons or aura, only their bodies. With that, the duel begins, and Buren charges at Raon, throwing a series of punches and kicks. Raon, however, skillfully dodges every attack with ease. Frustrated, Buren decides to switch tactics, planning to use the righteous tiger fist technique his father taught him. Buren reasons that he's not breaking any rules since Glenn didn't explicitly ban fist techniques. As Buren launches his righteous tiger fist at Raon, some students cheer him on, convinced that Raon won't be able to counter Buren's powerful moves. Buren presses forward, determined to secure the top trainee spot, unwilling to let someone from an indirect lineage like Raon take it from him. As he fights, memories of his father, Karun, flash in his mind. He recalls a harsh moment when Karun disowned his older brother, calling him a weakling and telling Buren that he should only concern himself with proving his own strength. Karun's final words, urging him not to disappoint him, echo in Buren's mind, fueling his determination. Back in the duel, Buren is aware that his father is watching him, and he feels an intense need to prove himself. Meanwhile, Raon is noticing something surprising. He can clearly see the movement of Buren's fists, the flow of his technique, and the pattern of his attacks. Taking a step back, Raon pauses, causing Buren to ask if he's planning to give up. As Buren moves in to strike, Raon prepares himself as well, and their fists collide in a powerful clash. Raon then counters, using the very righteous tiger fist technique that Buren had been using, and lands a solid punch on Buren, sending him to the ground and leaving the entire audience stunned. As Buren struggles to catch his breath, he looks up at Raon in disbelief and asks how he managed to use the righteous tiger fist technique. Raon simply replies that Buren had demonstrated it for him, so he just copied it, the Guardians murmuring in amazement and exchanging curious glances, speculating that Raon must have somehow learned the advanced technique in secret. Even Limer, who has seen countless students over the years, is momentarily stunned, recognizing that Raon's skill is indeed authentic. He observes how Raon expertly countered Buren's powerful righteous tiger fist by spinning in the opposite direction, perfectly neutralizing the force of the attack. Limer reflects on the significance of what he's just witnessed. It's already impressive when someone can simply understand and follow the flow of another's martial arts technique. Such perception alone would mark them as a genius. But Raon didn't stop at merely observing. He absorbed and adapted the technique, crafting his own unique approach. This, Limer realizes, is a rare level of skill, one that suggests Raon may be on a path to become the strongest fighter across the continent. It's precisely this caliber of talent and potential that the Zeegart family values and searches for in its members. With a proud smile, Limer steps forward and calls an end to the match, declaring that the winner is clear for all to see. He then raises his voice, officially announcing Raon as the victor. Overjoyed, Sylvia and Helen rush over to embrace Raon, their faces glowing with pride and happiness. As they reach him, Raon grins widely and suggests they should all head home, mentioning with a laugh that he's starving. Meanwhile, Runan's parents celebrate with her, their faces lit up with pride and excitement, while Buren's father, Karun, remains stone-faced and cold, turning away from his son's defeat without a single word or sign of acknowledgement. Later that evening, Buren stands stiffly in his father Karun's office, feeling as Karan stands with his back to Buren, the silence stretching uncomfortably. Without turning around, Karan finally speaks, as he asks Buren if he remembers the expectations set for him. Buren timidly replies that he was told to become the top trainee and never allow himself to lose to anyone. Karan nods, as if confirming Buren's understanding, and then adds that he hadn't asked for much. All he had expected was for Buren to defeat Raon and secure the title of top trainee, simple tasks that he believed his son could achieve. But now, Karun's voice rises as he accuses Buren of losing to the son of a woman he considers an insect, who had even lost her direct lineage status. With a harsh glare, Karun demands to know if Buren's failure was a deliberate attempt to shame him, or if his son plans to follow the same path as his disowned brothers, outcasts who were no longer part of the family. Buren, now sweating under his father's harsh words, tries to hold his composure, but Karun is unmoved. He continues, pointing out that Buren has already missed his first chance, yet reminds him that another opportunity to become the top trainee will come at the graduation ceremony. He orders Buren to secure the top spot next time, then dismisses him without a second glance. Feeling dejected, Buren leaves the room, his father's words echoing painfully in his mind. Overwhelmed with anger and shame, he finds himself punching a wall, blaming Raon for his current predicament. Buren wanders around, deeply puzzled by his loss. He wonders why he fell short despite all the effort he put in to keep up with everyone else. Eventually, he finds himself at the training room, stepping inside almost out of habit. As he enters, he realizes he's the only one there, likely because everyone is resting after the test. Grabbing a dumbbell, he begins to work out, but his gaze soon shifts to the student lockers, and Raon's locker in particular catches his eye. Driven by curiosity, he decides to take a quick look inside. When he opens Raon's locker, Buren is stunned. He finds it filled with worn-out shoes, at least 10 pairs, all well-used and showing heavy signs of wear. He realizes with shock that Raon had gone through all those shoes in just 6 months, while he himself had only had to replace his shoes twice in that time. The sight hits him hard, making him see Raon's dedication in a new light. Buren starts recalling how Raon was constantly training, never taking a break, even when Buren was trying to look impressive by practicing flashy sword swings instead of focusing on foundational training. He remembers all the times he was relaxing in the dormitories while Raon was hard at work. It becomes clear to Buren that Raon was following the true path of Zeekhart while he had strayed from it, choosing shortcuts over real discipline. He stares at the dumbbell in his hand, reflecting on his own approach to training. Then, with a newfound sense of respect, he carefully places Raon's shoes back in the locker. Leaving the training room, Buren walks out with a determined look on his face. As Raon checks his system in his room, Wrath, visibly annoyed, starts venting. He mentions that he's lived for hundreds of years, yet he's never met anyone quite like Raon. Curious, Wrath asks Raon what he really is. Raon simply shrugs and replies that he doesn't know either, so Wrath is free to imagine whatever he wants. Raon, however, is more interested in the skill he earned from Wrath by winning their bet. He asks Wrath about it, and Wrath explains that it's called Legendary Senses. He describes it as a remarkable ability, but insists it's too good for someone like Raon. Wrath goes on to explain that this skill will enhance the range of Raon's senses. Since it's currently only at 1 star, Raon's sensory range will increase by around 10% for now. Raon acknowledges that it sounds useful, but is puzzled about why it's called Legendary Senses. Wrath admits he just made up the name and asks if it doesn't sound cool. As Raon leaves the room, he replies that Wrath just has bad taste. The following morning, a man arrives with a message for Raon and Sylvia. He informs them that the patriarch, Glenn, has summoned Raon. Sylvia becomes anxious and asks if something is wrong with Raon, but the man, who happens to be Glenn's assistant, reassures her that there's nothing to worry about. He explains that Glenn simply wants to personally give Raon the bronze plaque. When Raon arrives to meet Glenn, the patriarch tells his assistant, somewhat reluctantly, that he will honor his promise. The assistant agrees and hands the bronze plaque to Raon. Raon accepts it, and Glenn explains that if he ever returns the plaque, He can request an item of equivalent value in exchange. Raon then says he'd like to make a request and calls out his mother's full name, Sylvia Zeeghart. He asks Glenn what he needs to do for her to regain her position. Glenn and his assistant both sigh in relief. Glenn clarifies that he assumes Raon is referring to Sylvia's direct lineage title, and Raon confirms this, though he can't help but notice that Glenn's energy seems to have softened significantly. Glenn begins explaining that while it's theoretically possible for Raon to achieve such accomplishments, gaining the recognition of others is not as straightforward as it sounds. He compares it to trying to reach up and pluck the moon from the night sky, an almost impossible feat. Raon, however, smiles confidently and replies that while it may be difficult, it's still within reach. He then sets the plaque down respectfully and thanks Glenn for answering his question. Just as Raon begins to turn away to leave, Glenn stops him, pointing out that Raon hasn't asked for any kind of reward. He merely posed a question, something Glenn could have answered even without the plaque. This catches Raon off guard. He hadn't expected the Northern King of Annihilation, known for his intimidating presence, to offer such generosity. Glenn encourages him to make a wish, saying he should feel free to state what he truly desires. Raon hesitates, but then he recalls something important he has been considering, something that he knows will help him reach his goals. Glenn seems surprised, remarking that the instructors would provide him with the necessary techniques during his basic training. Raon, however, clarifies that he isn't looking for a standard training method. He wants a superior aura training technique, one that's beyond the usual curriculum. He boldly requests that Glenn teach him a technique worthy of the bronze plaque's value. Raon reflects that the shadow training technique he used in his past life is insufficient for his current ambitions. He is driven by a deep need for power, power that will allow him to restore Sylvia's lineage title, reclaim her honor, and ultimately take down Deruf, the nemesis who tormented him in his previous life. For all of this, he knows he requires a stronger, more refined aura. Glenn snaps his fingers, and a hidden door opens, revealing shelves filled with numerous books. The shelves surround Raon, and Glenn explains that these are some of Zeeghart's treasured books. He tells Raon that if he places his hand in the center, the book most suited to his needs will come forth. Raon places his hand on the central platform, thinking that he just needs something stronger than his old shadow training technique, and he hopes for a technique that will genuinely make him stronger. Suddenly, an old book begins to levitate and flies directly toward him. Glenn and his assistant watch in surprise, their eyes wide as the book floats closer. The book opens on its own, presenting its pages to Raon, who realizes with amazement that this is the legendary Thousand Flames technique. Raon stares at the book, intrigued and wondering what kind of training method this might be. He attempts to turn another page, hoping to learn more, but the book suddenly takes on a life of its own. The pages flip open rapidly, filling the air around Raon, then begin to glow, wrapping him in a ring of flames. Glenn watches Raon with a thoughtful, almost distant expression, as memories from the past flood his mind. He recalls one of his loyal men bringing him troubling news that Sylvia was being ostracized by the family. Glenn, focused solely on Zeeghart's strength and unity, had dismissed it, saying it was none of his concern. His priority was the family's growth and power above all else. Another time, the same man reported that Sylvia had left the family because of a man she loved. Glenn had brushed off this report as well, calling it trivial and ordering his man to stop wasting his time with unimportant matters. Back then, Glenn was convinced that emotions were useless distractions, obstacles in the path to achieving true martial greatness. His heart had been hardened by his singular focus on the family's power, a path that led him to transcendent martial prowess but came with a high cost, a cost he only fully understood later. A grim memory surfaces, the day that same man informed him that Sylvia's husband and daughter had been ambushed. The attack was orchestrated by a group called Eden, who had recognized Sylvia. The man reported that only Sylvia had survived, miraculously, though she was pregnant at the time. Hearing this news, Glenn had felt a pang of emotion crack through his hardened soul, a feeling he had almost forgotten. But it was too late. No amount of regret could undo the past or bring back those lost to the attack. In that moment, Glenn had understood the price he paid for ignoring his family's suffering. Returning to the present, Glenn makes a silent vow to himself that even if Raon and Sylvia resent him for his past decisions, he will protect them. He is determined to be there for them, no matter what they feel toward him, as a way to atone for his mistakes. Meanwhile, Raon's attention is fully on the Thousand Flames technique book floating before him. He feels an intense rush of knowledge flowing into his mind, as if the book is directly transferring its contents to him. Sensing this, Glenn asks Raon what he did. Raon replies that he's not entirely sure, and he just remembers the content of the training technique. Glenn then asks Raon for the book's name, and Raon replies that it's called the Thousand Flames Technique. At that moment, Raon's system notifies him that the technique is being saved into his memory.